Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for our episode today. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. I have always thought the actions of men the best interpreters of their thoughts. John Locke. Our guest today, great friend of the Culture Matters podcast, author, Answers from the Stairs, Lessons of a Life I Lived on Purpose. Is that I lived on purpose? Because it's a big I.
No, lessons from a life lived on purpose.
Lessons
That's
from
just
a life lived on purpose. You know what? This giant eye here looks
looks
like
like
an
an eye,
eye.
right?
But then
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, anyway, I love that either way. Our guest today, a great steward culture, values, mentor, um, author. Today we're going to be talking about the one of Christopher Vester's books, and part of the chapter or part of the book, one of the chapters, The Power of Thought. And I always appreciate you, my friend, and learning more about this book. It holds a very close relationship to my journey and our journey. And just even before we turn this on, just a mutual friend that we were talking about potentially being part of, let's say, a solution to
Solution.
things in their life. Then the fact that we know each other because of that person just makes this so cool.
It's crazy.
The round robin and of life. I want to open it up here with a thought is a very powerful thing, whether that's in a positive or negative way. That thought has been at the top of my mind recently after hearing a number of podcasts talk about the power of thought in our lives. Why is thought and the power of thought important to you, and do you and our audience in your view?
Everything begins with a thought. Whether it's the idea of creating a business, or the idea of creating a family, or the thought of who you want to be. It all begins in thought. And to me, it's like what goes into feeding those thoughts. Where's your thought? What's the thought generator? Like I think a big part of that chapter, if I remember correctly, was the idea of, hey, stewarding the sourcing of thought, because it matters. And so if you just look at any given thing, whether it's a created invention or a relationship, there's a thought that started that process of action to make it happen. So, I mean, thoughts are the root of everything.
It says here, one of my team members asked me if I really believed that we can change the thought process. What do you think it is in people to lead to them thinking that that isn't possible?
Their lens of life and history that goes along with that. Everybody, our growing up situation, our past relationships, our past situations create this lens that we view life through. And if they've been in situations where people around them have bad thought processes, and they look at those people over the course of their life and say, well, they're always having these bad situations or bad things happen to them, and it creates this lens that they view life through, that, well, it's just going to happen the way it's going to happen. And in that particular instance, I actually remember who that person was. That was the situation. He had been stuck in this idea of a low self-worth. And because of that low self-worth, and that being the constant view of life for himself, the idea of being a better achiever, a higher achiever, or having more impact on people around him in a positive way, just was almost impossible for him to even conceive. Like the idea of that, of him being a positive influence, he struggled with. But it came down to self-worth and how his environment growing up led him to a very negative self picture and had a very low value of himself.
How do
And
you help someone in that position?
well, God doesn't make mistakes, and He created us with purpose. That would be my first thing. Um, and so you are here for a purpose with purpose. And how do we start to look at or think about that? If we're valuable enough to have been created, then how do we fulfill that purpose? I mean, I think I think that's probably one of the more difficult things to overcome, because by the time I've able to interact with them, they're well into adulthood most of the time. With the exception of my children and the children that they're around. So there's a lot of onion layers to peel back to get to why they have that low self-esteem or low self-value. But you can begin to coach them in, like, number one, you're created with purpose. Let's help find that purpose. And then let's start making promises to yourself around that purpose, and let's start keeping them, because the whole idea of self-value and self-worth, and like that idea, it comes from the ability to do things that you say you're going to do to build self-confidence, to help you believe in yourself. But yeah, the first thing I'd point out is, why do you think you're here?
What do people say?
I don't know. A lot of them, I don't know. I've never thought about that. That's a scope bigger than I've ever thought about. But like, there's a book that I read that talks about, the idea of our fingerprint. I mean, there's 8 billion people on this planet, and none of us have the same fingerprint, which is a big number in and of itself. And then you think about, well, all the humans have ever walked the planet, none of them have had our fingerprint. We're that individually unique and individually created with unique purpose and unique plan. So if our creator can be that specific about how we're unique, then we need to begin to think about, okay, well, if I'm that unique, then what's the role that I play just by being created, and how can I go into that? That's the power of thought. Like, thinking that deeply about, why am I here? I'd say that the overwhelming thing is, I don't know. Like, that's the most heard answer in that question. I mean, for a long time, I didn't know. So I can come at that conversation with having been in that position. I mean, I think all of us have been in that position. It's just that the very few of us begin to ask ourselves that question and think about it, have that thought about, why am I here? What am I called to do? Who am I called to impact? What problem what problem in this world was I created to help solve?
Wow. You say here, for me, I often feel, or how I feel often determines how much effort I put in or don't put in when it comes to certain initiatives or development programs. Our feelings about things, along with our beliefs and emotions, are based on a lifetime of experience of being able to control our thoughts. When we put real effort and intentionality into our thought process so we can move forward and develop. That means with our thoughts, we can control our feelings and control how we react to something. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the energy that I put in, I want to address that first. Like, that's a great thought. And that came from reflecting back over 50 plus years of life and going, I can see where I applied myself really, really deeply into a thought. And then if there was no interest, you just glaze over it. I think that's how the majority of people operate, Well, then I just talked about the thought of purpose. Well, if you think about the things that speak to you and drive you deeper into something, that's where real purpose can be found, because there's a reason that appeals to you. There's a reason that's something that you want to dive into, and there's a reason that speaks to you. So I think, first off, paying attention to those things, like, what is it that drives curiosity or desire or excitement or passion, when I start to think about it. because I think to a degree that's where purpose can be found. The idea of being able to consistently read the second part of that again. I want to hear that again.
When we put real effort and intentionality into our thought process, so we can move forward and develop.
Yeah. So the real effort and intentionality. One of the things I've learned over probably the last 5 to 10 years maybe is that leadership really comes from intentionality.
Oh, I should add, that means with our thoughts, we can control our feelings and control how we react to something.
Yeah.
Another level of.
It's just another level of maturity, right? Emotional maturity. But leadership comes from intentionality. In any given relationship, the one who's the most intentional becomes the leader of that relationship. When it comes to external relationships, well, if your relationship that you're trying to build, if you're trying to develop yourself, then the relationship that you've got is just with you and God. Well, how can I be more intentional about developing me to make the relationship with myself better? So by developing that relationship intentionally, you're creating this idea of leadership, self-leadership. Self-leadership just develops into emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, so that you can rely less on being driven by emotion and more of of the thought process that goes into it. So I think more logical thinking, less reliant on emotion. That's been my experience.
Reactive?
Yeah. Less reactive and more proactive. We had this conversation in the business just this past week about the difference between, reacting to the world around us versus proactively investigating our opportunity stream. I had a conversation with a gentleman today, actually, where we talked about the idea of understanding he's a second gen business operator, and he's having to learn from his father how to steward the business well. And in his concept, they need to be doing a better job of stewardship. And I said, well, intentionality creates leadership. So there's an ability to lead that relationship from being intentional. But that's going to take a level of proactivity you've never had before. And when you can show that level of proactivity, then you'll be able to lead that relationship better. So yeah, I think that definitely changes the proactivity versus reactivity.
That makes me think of if someone reacts to me, my inclination may be to react back.
Oh, sure.
But if I proact, I may be able to cancel out that negative domino effect. However, what if I can't? Because it just cuts too close to my leadership lid, and then who pulls us out? I think of it like we're wrestling against each other. Who pulls us out? Somebody's got it. And then it's like, okay, we get off the call, and then I'm gonna go to my coach, which is my
Significant
coach. Yeah. Maybe my wrestling counterpart goes to theirs. And I think they're supposed to, she in this case, she's supposed to help me realize where I was a jerk. So that way I can own something. Now, if I can't hear her, I better get a therapist.
Sure.
No. So like, if we can unpack this piece a bit or see some holes in there, because like,
sure.
If someone's reacting to me, I want to say the best of myself is going to proact, but it may not. I may fail.
Yeah, Jay, I can think of a situation, you just mentioned it, of us being on a call and it getting or feeling contentious. Like you asked me in that moment, why are you being defensive? I wasn't being defensive. I just wanted to be heard because I wanted to proactively give you the answers rather than reactively giving you answers to questions you're asking. Right. And, not because I thought I knew where you were going in those questions, but I had studied that piece of our business to to the exponential ninth degree. It's like crazy deep into that thing. So it wasn't that I was getting defensive, but you saw me as being defensive. You asked me, why are you being defensive? Well, I'm really not. I want to be proactive in the conversation and move it forward and get further along than where we were headed. And then we get off the call and it's like, to some degree, a level of frustration because we're like, okay, well, what did get accomplished in that call? And then having to unpack it. Well, I did not unpack that with anyone but me. I just sat and reviewed my notes about, okay, number one, why did he see me as defensive? Number two, okay, if that's how he saw me, what was causing that? Was it tone or was it body language or was it like, what was it? Because I really wholeheartedly was not defensive about the conversation. It was just, I want to go faster. And so, and that came across, I think in that exact chapter, I talk about the difficulty of being passionate around a subject and how that can get in the way sometimes. Because when that happens, just like it did then, like the passion in me about that particular subject gets in the way of me hearing the other side of the equation. It shuts down thought. So if we know that thoughts are powerful, then lean into the fact that they're just questions that are creating thought.
I think it's a great let's say example for the inevitability of emotion, passion in relationship. And relationships take work.
Imagine a relationship with no emotion or passion.
Yeah, it's easy to a cult.
Yeah, yeah.
The entrepreneur's dream on according to social media, where the employees fall in line,
Yeah,
with the
but
perfect cars.
I don't know that that's the emotion. I don't feel like that's the entrepreneurial dream. I mean, I don't. I would. I understand that idea of they all buy into the vision that's created, but if all you're looking for is everybody that'll drink the Kool-Aid and the cyanide with you, like what have you really got? And
Well,
that's an emotionless relationship.
well, what we've got in that scenario is a short-term productivity boost for sure. What we get is the visionary's vision happening. If that vision, which may be rooted in emotion, right? I lack something, so I want something. I think something could be better, so I want it the way I think it could be. I'm attached to the outcome. I have because there's something that I want. I want to go here, so let's go here. But it's not a straight line. There's going to be zigzags. So in us entrepreneurs' defense, it's emotional. It's going to be emotional. It's our livelihood. It's not only our livelihoods, it's our lives. It's how we're viewed in society. It's how we view ourselves. But yeah, where are you
So
going?
I have a thought on that. Like the power of thought. It is our lives, but if we're stewarding what we're entrepreneurs of, well, it's not just ours. I mean, in our particular case, we've got a total of 200 employees. Like it's not just our lives. So if we become completely consumed in our emotion and we're not allowing the emotion of the 200, like that's the idea of cult, But if you really want to build culture and legacy and those things, then the voice of the 200 matter. I think in that situation, we're talking about looking at things through a lens of life. The only way to do that is to have conversations with those in the organization and see their lens of life, not trying to sell them on vision and not trying to indoctrinate them into the cult, but to hear what's important to them and then help them see how they can achieve that thing of importance through the vision of the organization.
I think that's a great point because it segues to culture is actually revealed in how we serve our customers because the vision is revealed in the work. The employees, our people, become a feedback loop for, are we on track with service or are we off track with service? And you're right, when we can't hear them, whether we're uninterested or whether we don't know that we're not, but when we can't hear them, our people, over time the service to the customer will go down and down. I think I've even had it backwards a lot in the beginning, especially in the beginning of the endeavor of Culture Matters. When the emphasis is too much on internal and it's not a consequence of internal, external, meaning company, customer focused, which means actions are representing the values. The employees are watching. And then are we listening to their feedback? So I think how you just phrased it is extremely accurate and helpful because if the order, let's say that it just becomes a conversation amongst the company of who we are and what we're about and who we should be, and it's a lot of talking and a lot of meeting, we likely aren't doing enough service.
Right.
Like we exist to serve customers as a business. How we serve reveals our values. Mm-hmm. So when I'm looking at our contemporaries, those that are attempting to help, in the corporate landscape as it relates to companies and their cultures and their leadership and their evolution, I'm seeing an interesting thing where it's becoming so company focused, where culture is becoming a marketing.
Yes.
Meaning like, and it's something like so where I'm going with this is the overemphasis on the people internal could be a consequence of us losing sight on the customer journey, serving the customer. The values are taught with how our people see us interacting with the customer. What are your thoughts?
So two thoughts on that. I get that. I can definitely see culture being used as purely marketing. And what I'm hearing you say is that because there's so much focus on the cultural customer, meaning the internal employee, that we lose focus on how we're treating the external customer.
Our employees are not our customers. They're a part of us. They're not our customers. They are.
So what I'm hearing you say is there's no such thing as a cultural customer. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, the culture, it depends what
So when we've talked before, and the idea is one of the terms is
culture. No, I stand more firmly than ever on that.
Okay.
Like the cultural is like relationally, there's a give and take. There's that I've came up with that idea as a reaction to the tyranny that I deal with, generally that manifests in just companies, meaning because oftentimes we're caught up and we're not, even aware that we're not. How do you help someone be aware that they're not aware that they're not aware that they're not aware?
And that's why I'm looking for clarity because I don't believe we can lose sight of the ultimate of that idea that the first customer is the cultural customer of the employee base that we're serving. Like that really is a thing. And
that's where I'm saying I think that's the piece that I'm challenging is that the customer is the reason we exist. Our values are revealed in how we serve them. That's how the people that we work with learn who we really are.
All right.
What we're about.
All right. So here's the thought on that. Well, let's talk about the power of thought on that. So, but a frontline employee who has 99 times the interaction with the societal customer the way they are taught of how to interact with their customer is how they're interacted with culturally by their leadership, who has less involvement with the customer. What I'm saying is,
Yeah.
so you've got salespeople on the ground talking to customers. Well, how they interact with that customer will depend a lot on how their manager, that middle level manager, interacts with them as a cultural customer, and how they see that manager interact with the social customer, the outside the organization customer. Like they'll learn from that. They'll be taught that from seeing it happen. But there's way less involvement with that social customer, the outside customer, when you go up to one level of leadership. And then so every level of leadership puts you one step further away from that frontline society customer.
Yes.
And you're not going to get as many opportunities to react to that customer or interact with that customer, frontline customer.
Yes.
Not so when you do get a chance, how they see you interact with them matters. Even
It's
at a
everything.
higher,
It's why Sam Walton would measure the aisles.
yeah, but at a much higher level of effect. So because they know you only get so many only so many possibilities or so many opportunities to engage with a paying customer, like how you show up for that paying customer matters exponentially more sometimes than how you actually interact culturally. But it doesn't change the level of importance of interacting culturally at one level down and two levels down. Am I hearing you correctly in that? Because
Yeah, that's a
we'd be
great
on
way
the
to
same
put it.
page with that.
Well, and a big part of interacting in a big part of interacting in a cultural way with one's people is telling them the truth.
Yes.
Now, the truth has multiple sides because there's a subjectivity involved with objectivity. Meaning, if I believe that something about someone that they may or may not agree with, there's going to be an interplay. That's where the relationship comes in. But avoiding the tough conversations, which is a natural, it happens. Avoiding them. That's what, let's say, sows the seeds of mistrust.
And resentment.
Yeah, which starts to separate, and then that also affects how we relate to our customers. The one thing I want to add though is the person at the top of the org chart may not. We're all going to be fighting at some level the forces of the space time, right? Like the distance of being.
Sure.
It's as we're growing and growing and growing. We may be forcing, but our people will know when we're all in and we're not. They
Yes.
just will. They will know it. They will feel it. And this is where, like, when I'm fully bought in to Culture Matters, everybody knows I'm fully bought in. I'm showing up present. I'm taking notes. I'm putting in the extra calls. I'm doing 268 podcasts in a year, not 100. My people know it. The people that have, chosen to let me be a part of their journeys as entrepreneurs, they know it. Everybody knows it. So the question is, are we? And there may be a lot of listeners on this that think they are and they aren't, or aware they aren't, and they think that that's still the move because they have this person plugged in that they think is going to run things the way that they will, and that may or may not be true. They'll have to see how that plays out. But I think that's an important piece is the even if that relationship, so because as that relationship is distant between that original customer and that original founder, the buy-in is known, it's felt, it's sensed, it's 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 hard to articulate, and that's really culture. It's hard to articulate. It's hard to, you don't even want to quantify it because once you do, it becomes culty. right? If we just break it down to the puzzle, right? Story and language and mediums. What are we creating a freaking religion? No, it's just work. It's how we work that reveals like, are we bought in or not? And like, this is this exploration that I've been on all these years, and of course, the honor of being on with you, and great people. It's like the people will know when you'll know when I'm not bought in, right? Oh, Jay
Yeah,
hasn't, shared that any books in a while. Is he on a bender?
I was gonna say I'm still waiting for the list of 300 things you did last year, other than podcasting. So, but
If we're going to be, while we're going to be in the confession booth, yeah, I should tell the audience here that it's February 8th as of this recording. I've looked at that list and thought about that list for the last 38 days. And every day I've made a decision not to post it. No, this is good. Like, and for 38 days, I've made a decision not to post it. And there's truth in what you've acknowledged. I'm not as bought in to reading and listening. I mean, and I can make an excuse. Oh, I do so much of it because I'm comparing myself to other people, which is BS,
yep.
right? I'm not. My priorities have shifted and my aims have been elsewhere. And I'm not sure what's right and what's wrong in that. And part of the value of having a good friend, a colleague, a companion, a someone in my life that's value add, like Chris, is it is his clear observation. Jay, I haven't seen that list. You're
And
right, which proves the whole damn point of this podcast, which is awesome.
yeah, so two things I want to dissect from that. So you talked about first, I want to talk about you said when the people know that you're bought in or not, and they react accordingly. And here's what I mean by that. If they know you're 100% bought in and they're not, they're going to react accordingly. They're either going to exit because they don't want to be bought in and they can't get bought in, or they're going to get bought in because you're bought in. Like it really will determine where the culture goes, because they're the level of comfort. I say it in the meetings sometimes when we have our new employee, like when they come in and when we give them the culture story, I say, have you ever been to a party and you just knew that you weren't supposed to be there? Like, I've been to a party and like I just know this is not my scene, and it just doesn't feel right, and I figure out a way to leave early. Well, that may be the case here, where it's just not going to feel right. And it's okay. It just means we're not your party. Well, that's going to be either because they feel everybody's saying it and not living it out, or they could be saying it and they can't get bought into that, saying it, living out, and they can't. They're like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. Or they see it being said and they see it being lived out and they go, yeah, like this is my party. So it will define culture, the buy-in of the top of the food chain, say, for lack of a better word. And to say to you, like, some of me looking for that list is selfish, because I do like to see how much of an influence I have by sending you books to read that are on the list. Like, so there's some of that, but a lot of it's, hey, let me see what else Jay read, because it's probably something I'm going to want to engage in, just because we share so much of the same thought processes and challenge. Like, I take a lot of challenges from you. Hey, add this to your list, because it's something you're not going to agree with, and that's the best place to be. But there's also seasons, Jay. There's seasons where I can say for sure for months on end that I will double down on the amount that I'm consuming. And then I think there's seasons where I can't double down on it because I'm trying to take what I've consumed and put it into action. Because I think in some cases it can be difficult to consume and put into action.
Yeah, the irony of it is when I feel as though I've been so valuable and no one cared and no one gave me any opportunity. I'm basically a walking library. Now that everyone is caring and is giving the opportunity, I'm an idiot. I'm being dramatic to make a point. Like, life is riddled with these ironies, right? Like, when I was at my highest peak of that, and of course, I actually do feel more valuable today than I did then. But let's just say, right, like I have nothing else going on because no one's giving me an opportunity to serve. So all I'm doing is doing push-ups every day and reading, and I'm just the most helpful person ever, helping no one. And then now everyone wants my help, and I'm helping everyone, and now I'm just not as good. It's the perfect example of like life and
Yes.
just the constant. What is that? It's hypocrisy is
I don't,
part
I
of
don't, I
life.
don't, I don't think it's hypocrisy
What is it?
because, well, because you got to think like you couldn't provide the value that you provide now had you not put in the work all those times that nobody saw you. The scary thing is okay, well, how do I continue to make space to continue to grow so I can continue to add value? Like you've got to figure like that's what I mean by seasons because it's um
Which is
you,
the part of the value of thought. I mean, is just go ahead to interrupt.
yeah. So it's about like how do I navigate the water of hey, I got to continue to grow because otherwise I'm capping everyone I'm helping because you're putting a lid on them, right? Now their lid's very high with 12,000 books consumed and hours and hours and hours of consulting done. Like that's added to your skill level and your skill set and your ability to help. But at some point, people are going to outgrow that of you, or at least you hope so. Well, the way for them to never outgrow you is for you to continue to grow. And then, okay, well, how do I balance that of what's my continuing level of education so that I can continue to serve at the highest possible level? Now, especially it's true because people are paying attention. Well, in an organization that works the same way, like lots and lots of times I was reading and like getting like just cramming as much information in my brain to be able to pull it out of my pocket whenever we needed it. Never being afraid to put it into place, putting it into action. But I can't stop doing that because 5 years from now, just like it was 6 years ago that Answers from the Stairs started, where I was consuming all this content and trying to put it in action. Well, if I stopped today, then in 2029, we're capped at 2024's Chris. Like today is as high as we'll go 5 years from now. And so there's got to be this balance of how do I make the space for continuing education while at the same time serving at the highest level I possibly can. Because if I stop educating, then my level stops. And that's the thought. Like that thought of, okay, well, where do I go from here? That would be a really powerful seed thought of based on the fact that I'm, for whatever reason, not putting out my list. Like, what's the thought behind why I haven't put it out? And then, okay, well, how, knowing that I've got to make space for continuing my education, how do I balance all that while providing the highest level of service that I can to my clients and then not putting the cap on how I can serve them by continuing my education? And it's hard, at least for me. That's hard.
What's our takeaway today for our three listeners?
3 takeaways. Our 3 listeners.
No, I'm just teasing. Yeah, gratefully
There's at least
definitely
three because
hundreds.
there's at
No,
least three
there's a
because we
lot.
know 3 people collectively.
Yeah.
Um, Number one, I would say examine where your thoughts are coming from. Like what fuel are you putting into your thought processor, your brain? What are you giving it to create thought? Because it matters. And then, okay, once it's a thought, what can come from it? I think in that chapter I talked about like why are you having that reaction? So if you have this thought, why are you having the thought? Being able to identify the reason behind the thought, and then okay, what's the ultimate fruit of that thought? What do you want to get out of that thought? I mean, we have like 3 million thoughts a day. I don't know what the number is. It's crazy. But if you're being intentional about the things that you're thinking about and what you're putting in your brain to create some thought, Like, what's the ultimate version of that to come from it? And then being able to look back at that list and say, okay, well, like, man, I got to get way more positive in my thought process, or I need some help to help these thoughts come to fruition. And how do I surround myself with people that I can help and pour into, and they can help me? That would be my thought.
If you're listening to this episode, please share this with a friend, someone you care for. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we'll see you next time.